you think, like, where would you want IP68?
Fish tank all day.
A fish tank, yes, because I put security cameras in my fish tank.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another In the Trenches episode. Really excited for this one. Today we're going to be talking about all things weatherproof. So if you can't geek out about weatherproofing, then who can't? Let's go.
What
I'm
can
super
you
excited.
geek out over?
Turn it off.
That's right. Right. What can you geek out over? So seriously, we're going to be talking about weatherproofing, the importance of it, why you should consider it so much when installing or thinking about installing equipment, or maybe who is even going to be doing the installation of the equipment. And so we've got our awesome panel of experts here with us today. Hope everyone's doing well.
Hey.
Great.
Hello.
Awesome. Awesome. And so I think first we should probably start by taking a step back, and we're going to unpack a few questions about waterproofing cameras specifically. And I would like to start with the weather rating our cameras actually have, which is IP67. And some have IP66, but most have IP67. So can we start there? And experts, can you help me understand a little bit about IP66, IP67, what that means?
Sure. Yeah. So IP, is it stands for International Protection Marking. So it's just like a rating that an enclosure is given around a piece of equipment, and it's consisted of 2 and sometimes 3 digits. The first digit, so IP and IP66, the first 6 would be the protection of the enclosure from foreign objects like dust or anything like that, and then the second digit would be from liquids, from water mainly. So 66 or 67, obviously the 67 has a little more robust protection from liquid than 66 would, but the same from dust or foreign objects. And then sometimes there's a third digit, and what was it I say? A mechanical impact, I guess, but that's not required by the electrical code, so you don't usually see the third digit. So yeah,
There you go.
that's IP ratings.
Yeah.
Thanks. Awesome. Anybody have any other thoughts on the IP rating?
Well, it's and it's important because ingress of solids and water can happen a lot easier than people realize. Because we put these cameras in just about every environment you can think of, and it never seems to shock me that somehow every now and then a camera will get something inside of it that probably shouldn't have. And that's even with meeting the ratings or exceeding them, because things find a way, no matter what. Water's going to find the path of least resistance. Somehow dust just can crawl into things. But with these IP ratings, it definitely signifies that we've done our best to make sure, and we being a manufacturer, that these items, solids or liquids, do not get inside and affect the device, which in our case is the camera.
I think it might be important to point out that rating is applied to the camera, not necessarily. There's a couple other points of vulnerability that you have to take additional measures to protect. So things like the connection point is not necessarily covered under that rating. That's why we have weatherproof connectors and other measures that you need to take. I mean, where else do you see those places where the camera meets something else is a point of potential failure, and you have to be very careful that you're taking the appropriate measures in each of those spots.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Before we move on to things like some of those other vulnerability points, IP66, IP67, how do we stack up? Are those pretty good rankings? Are they not good rankings?
Well, I mean, the timeline has been, I remember IP65 was awesome, right? IP65 now. Then it moved to IP66, right? Whoa. Now we're at IP67 pretty standard. Who knows? I am seeing a lot of cameras out there that are IP68. That may be the standard a couple years down the road. Who knows?
Would you say that IP68 is overkill for most applications, or do you think where would you want IP68?
Fish tank all day.
A fish tank, yes, because I put security cameras in my fish tank.
mean, maybe they thought IP66 was overkill back in the day. It's just, I think it's all the way the manufacturing goes. And now if it costs less to do better, why not? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, even with IP67, I've still seen water get in. I've still seen dust get in. It happens. And it's not just our cameras, it's a lot of different manufacturers. So it all depends on, they can affect the rating just by how they unscrew and screw back parts of the camera, and we know our technicians and others that do install stuff sometimes don't do that right. So everything can affect it.
Yeah.
I feel like I see IP67 with like PTZs, things with moving parts that are a little more difficult to secure.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. But yeah, I mean, back to what Gil said, though, I mean, the IP rating can definitely be completely negated just due to poor, installation or just, one small step that you missed in terms of like sealing or screwing. Let's make sure the threads are connected when you're, putting everything together. Completely
Removing
negated.
and losing the gaskets.
Yeah. I mean, no one would do that.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That's actually a pretty good segue right into another question I wanted to cover, which what are some installation tips you might have for waterproofing?
Waterproof the connectors.
Yeah, definitely. First, line of defense that's going to keep your camera lasting a long time is make sure that the connection, the termination is completely enclosed correctly with the weatherproof cameras or connectors that come with all of our cameras. It's just kind of like a plastic housing with a rubber grommet that screws together from the pigtail to the cable ends once they're plugged in. It's just like a plastic case that's kind of fits tightly around the cabling on both ends, and then gives you like an extra kind of layer of protection in case any water gets inside your electrical mounting box or anything like that. Keep your terminations from corroding so much and get longer life out of your camera if you use those weatherproof connectors. It is one extra step though, and it's kind of a tedious step to do. So some technicians will kind of just throw them to the side and forget about them. But when we get these service requests, a lot of the time we find that is the reason why the camera is dropped off lines, just because water damage to the termination from not using the weatherproof connector. So definitely
I'll nail that. Tech laziness can really affect this. There are manufacturers out there. Our SCW cameras, the waterproofing is fairly simple. It's a little bit of a process. There are manufacturers out there where the process is a 15-minute video or a 3-page manual on how to do it properly. And let me tell you, a lot of people don't do it properly, and it affects it. But it's one of those things. Once you've done a couple, you get used to it. You can knock them out.
Right. So yeah, it sounds like that, there should be a significant importance put on weatherproofing the cable connection between the camera and the actual cable. Right. That was one of the points of vulnerability that you talked about, Micah. Some of the other points of vulnerability, right? Let's talk through some of those things. We talked about the cable connection, right? The pigtail from the camera and the cable connection. What are other points of vulnerabilities for water?
I think I said this in the electrical mounting box video, but water has a really, really, good way of traveling down the cable. So how you situate and support your cable going into the camera or the electrical mounting box housing is really important. Say that you have a camera that's installed on a wall kind of underneath an eave, sort of near a gutter, and you've got your cable coming out of the wall and going straight into the camera housing. If there's any water that travels down to that cable, it's just going to ride down the cable into the electrical mounting box. So I like to tell technicians to use what we call like a drip loop with the cable coming into the electrical mounting box. So where you take the cable or the conduit and kind of make a U shape. So if you have the penetration here, U shape to the camera, so the water can't travel down and then back up the cable into the camera housing. That'll definitely, cut down on the water that gets in and around the termination, which makes the camera last longer. And you can use, regardless if it's exposed cable or outdoor rated cable with, T and B's straps, or if it's flex or flexible conduit, you can do that. Obviously, you can't do it with EMT without a bend, but you got to make sure that your cable is situated in a way that's not going to make the camera as susceptible to the water traveling down it. It's another big one.
I
Well, let
want to
me,
circle back to points of vulnerability, right? We talked about a mounting box. I think, couldn't we say that the camera connecting to the mounting box, that alone, a connection point is probably a point of vulnerability potentially? I think I've heard some
yeah,
stories
I
about
want,
that.
actually, I want to like reinforce what Cal said several times. He said the word down. I've never seen water travel up. So if we're concentrating on making sure when we're installing everything, that everything is in a downward kind of manner, like where things go into the mounting boxes or the camera itself. Some people go directly into cameras. We don't suggest it, but it happens. But like Cal said, if you're making the water have to travel up, then there's a good chance that you have reinforced the waterproofing just with that procedure right there, because it's not going to go up, but it's always going to go down. So if you put the camera below or the mounting below anything that can travel water on it, it's going to find its way.
And then also too, where after the water has traveled down the cable, then you get to where the electrical mounting box meets the camera. And our cameras, like the deputy that Micah was talking about, I mean, honestly, all of our cameras include some rubber grommets that go in between the electrical mounting box and the camera to kind of take another step in weatherproofing and prevent that water from getting inside, reaching the termination. Those are also really kind of tedious. You really want to make sure that the grooves in those grommets are matched up perfectly to the outside of the camera and the electrical mounting box, and they fit snugly together. I mean, if they're turned a little bit and any kind of gap is exposed, then water is definitely going to find its way in. You do have the option of kind of taking an extra step on top of the weatherproofing that comes with the manufacturer and add stuff like silicone or caulk. That does make it a little more difficult if you have to troubleshoot and access the camera again, because you've got to cut the silicone or cut the caulk and reapply it. But it does, taking that extra step does help a lot.
But if you're caulking the mounting box and then the camera's on top of the mounting box, you should be able to pull the camera off and troubleshoot without interrupting that seal. It's one of the reasons why we strongly recommend mounting boxes in pretty much all situations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly. We earlier talked about a little bit, right? Waterproofing with the camera itself. And then we talked about how sometimes when we use with certain cameras like traditional domes, right, there's like installation techniques that can cause dust or water potentially get into the dome itself while installing it. Do you all have any like recommendations or tips, tricks, suggestions on installing domes to help with that?
We kind of nailed a lot of it. Yeah, with the back box and the loops and the different ways of bringing in the cable and or conduit, silicone. I mean, the biggest thing, the thing is with domes, if there's manual adjusting going on, they're going to pull the dome bubble off, they're going to make the adjustment, and they're going to put the dome bubble on. Like Cal said, those seals in there, or gaskets or grommets, whatever you want to call them, they need to align. I've seen more water, get into cameras because they didn't put the dome back together properly and the seal didn't align, and all it's just that little space. That's all it took. So that paying attention to that is huge.
Definitely. Heck yeah. That's awesome. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
weatherproofing?
It was kind of very random. And it's like, why?
No,
So I
I'm
can
not
put a
sure.
camera in my fish tank. This is what I'm hearing.
That's all this is what it's about, right? Is can we or can't we put a camera in the fish tank?
Do we want to see barracudas like very, very closely, see what they're doing? Yes, absolutely. But we got to have a good IP rating. Got to make sure it's the second
and IP
number is
67 is not sufficient for that. It has to be IP 68.
Got to be
okay.
the 8.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, and if you're talking about an aquarium type fish tank, then IP 68 won't work. Then we're getting into fathoms, That's our next
Ah.
discussion.
Is it?
Ooh, nice.
Because we
Love
do
that
so
segue.
much business with cameras and fish tanks
Right.
and
Yeah,
aquariums.
no, that's good. Any
Um,
final thoughts from our panel of experts on waterproofing, weatherproofing, tips, tricks?
I think
When in
like
doubt, talk it out.
Oh,
yeah, when in doubt, caulk it out, use some silicone and just use common sense. Kind of like everything, every one of these videos that we've done so far. Like
Mhm.
think about where you're mounting the camera. Is it going to be susceptible? Think about, the features on the mount and on the camera that you're susceptible to having water get in. Try to keep those areas away from the water and just take the
Mhm.
necessary steps to install it how it was designed. And you're going to get the
Yeah.
longest life out of your camera that way.
I mean, one of the things that jumps out at me is you're right, it is common sense. A lot of these things that we talk about it's a matter of making sure that you are not rushing it. I think that's what we see a lot with techs. Like they're rushing it. They're like, oh, I can save 5 minutes by leaving off these connectors. But understanding why they're there and being really diligent to think about each of those steps is important. Is the difference. It's not rocket science,
Well,
but
we
it
have
does
we have
require diligence.
Cal and I have prime examples of why rushing it in the beginning costs twice as much work on the back end because of
Oh,
what we're talking about right
every
Mhm.
day.
Yep.
Seems like.
now. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind, people.
absolutely. I just want to reiterate as well, the waterproof connecting kit is included with the purchase of our cameras. There's guides on our website and in our quick start guide to help you walk through all of that. But we'll link a lot of those resources in the description below. If you need to contact us, we'll have all our contact information below as well. Be sure to check out our other videos and installation tips and tricks on our YouTube channel. Post in the comments if there's anything that you want to see coming up next. Thanks so much for tuning in today's episode. Thanks, panel of experts, for being here and hanging out for this one. Looking forward to seeing you next time.
See ya.
I want to hear Ben say like and click below, or what is it that they always say?
Yeah, but
For the
here's my
YouTube
problem.
algorithm, like and
Click and
like and click.
subscribe.
The problem is James puts it above.
Oh, does he?
That's even funnier. Do it that. Yeah.
Yes.
Click the link below and then it just comes right
Every
above.
time I'm like, it's above again.
That's hilarious. Wait, click the link below.